Peace Action. And Brian Garvey, who you can see on your screen, is both handling the logistics here, the technology, and he'll also be coordinating, emceeing just looking at somebody coming in. He'll also be coordinating the Q&A. Needless to say, we have a little bit of competition tonight. We had not expected when we first scheduled this that Joe Biden would give us catastrophic performance at the debate with Trump as he did. And as we know tonight, he's conducting a press conference, I think in large measure to try to demonstrate that he should hang in, he should continue to have support as he runs. I should say that I was in a call this morning where a senior advisor, arms control negotiator, reported that he had a conversation, I guess in the last couple of days, with Ron Klain, who was Biden's chief of staff. And Klain had said that basically three people will be determinative in Biden's decision: Nancy Pelosi, Jill Biden, and Biden's sister. So I'm not sure that gives us great confidence, but just to understand the dynamics, the way our so-called democracy works. So anyway, I want to invite you, want to welcome you to our webinar tonight with Reiner Braun, European Peace Movement Priorities, focusing on Ukraine, Gaza, nuclear weapons, and elections. And we've had elections in Europe, and certainly with the elections that we hold here will have enormous influence on the world today and the future. Just to say that Reiner has extraordinary energy. In this heat, he came to Washington, where it was hotter than Boston, for a counter-NATO summit, about 125 people, an important conference, followed by a demonstration outside the White House, followed by traveling to New York, where he spoke to Peace Action New York State, and also met with a woman who's in the campaign to become a Senate candidate. And we've kept him busy here in Boston, 2 events so far, and tonight before he heads back to Berlin. Let me then introduce Reiner. He is among the most significant leaders of both the German and the European peace movements. He's the former president and executive director of the International Peace Bureau, and he was the lead organizer of the Ukraine Peace Summit held in Vienna, which brought together peace activists from across Europe, Russia, the United States, and the global South. I should also add that with Ukrainian intervention, there was a move that basically canceled the site where the conference was to have been held, and people managed to pull that off in 2 days. So one more reflection of the democratic nature of the war we're involved in. Reiner was the founder of the No to NATO, No to War International Network, and a leading opponent of NATO's war in Afghanistan. He's here for the events I just outlined. Reiner studied German literature, history, and journalism. Since 1982, he's been actively involved in the peace movement, working in the office of the Krefelder Appeal against new nuclear weapons in Europe. And in an afternoon discussion, we had, Reiner was talking about some of the similarities between the military buildup and nuclear arms race going on now in Europe, similar to what was happening in the 1980s. Beginning in 2004, he worked on various projects related to the Einstein Year at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science in Berlin and the Max Planck Society. From 2006 until 2017, he was executive director of Ilana in Germany. That's the organization of lawyers against nuclear arms. He also served as executive director of Scientists for Peace and Sustainability in Germany for several years. Reiner worked with the International Network of Engineers and Scientists for Global Responsibility beginning in the 1990s. He worked from 2006 to 2012 as director of the German Pugwatch Group. I should also add that Reiner was long a mean soccer player and follows soccer almost intensely as he follows political dynamics. So with that, let me turn the floor over to Reiner for some initial comments. That will be followed by a brief announcement from Paul Shannon, who's on the Executive Committee of Massachusetts Peace Action, on the board of Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security, and the leader of Mass Peace Action's Ukraine Committee. So with that, Reiner, then we'll move to Q&A. So Reiner, you are on.
Thank you, Joseph, for this kind invitation, and thanks for all of you to be present in this evening where your president makes such an important speech. You know, I would like to start with a short comment to the actual political situation. And when I summarize where we are staying now, I can only say that we have the most dangerous political situation since 1945. And I know about what I'm speaking. I know that there was in 1962 the Cuban crisis. But for me, the situation today is much more dangerous in the direction of a third big world war, including nuclear weapons. There are three hotspots where the escalation dynamic immediately can run to an international nuclear war. The first hotspot is definitely Ukraine and the escalation dynamics in the war in Ukraine. The escalation dynamics is on one side that NATO decided that it's possible to shoot into Russia far away from the border to Ukraine, and in this dynamic which is behind these developments. And I will come back when I'm speaking about the results of the NATO summit, which shows new elements of these escalation dynamics in Europe. These escalation dynamics has a high spot or high topic in the issue that Ukraine was trying to destroy the early warning nuclear weapon system of Russia. This means they want to make Russia blind. The reaction of this is very easy. This reaction means the use of nuclear weapons. This is in both strategies, in the strategy of the US and the strategy of Russia and nuclear weapons mentioned. So we are really facing a very dangerous situation when we are looking to the escalation dynamics of Ukraine. The second dynamic to a world war is, for me, I call it West Asia. It's not only the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I'm absolutely sure when the Israel right-wing government believes that they will lose the war, they will use nuclear weapons. But the dynamic has a second factor, and this is Iran and all these with Iran connected forces and parties. In their actions and the reactions of the United States is the dynamic for a nuclear war because of the allies of Iran and because of the maybe aggressions the United States against Iran. And the third is the region around China, however you want to call it China-Taiwan conflict, Northeast Asia, whatever. This region is also the dynamic for a nuclear war when the escalation and provocation on both sides will continue. So we are really facing, and this is well known also by the NATO leaders, and with the summit, they put again oil in the fire. When you read the final document of this summit, first of all, you are missing two words. The first word is diplomacy. There is no word for diplomacy and negotiations. It is only mentioned more wars, more weapons, more dynamics for weapon-oriented strategy, deterrence, and an end. No diplomacy. And the second word, what is absolutely missing, there is no word about Israel. But Israel is a NATO partner, and Israel is doing genocide. This is, when they are not mentioned it and criticize this is accepted by the NATO. And this is accepted by the 32 NATO countries. But NATO today is not any longer the North Atlantic Alliance, which is called in the name. NATO is today, and this was the first summit where they showed to the world, a global NATO, which include on different levels, bilateral and multilateral contracts, main other countries of the world, mainly Asian countries. And the main allies, which NATO was working very closely and which were present with their president or their prime minister at the summit, is Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Philippines, and from the fifth continent, Australia and New Zealand. This is a new NATO. And when you are now looking to the NATO countries and their partners, it is very easy to reflect whom they mean as opponent, as enemy, how they were calling it in the final document. It's on one side Russia. You can say many things about Russia. You can say many things about Putin. But to demonize him as the devil of the earth, that is definitely the wrong way. So the first point, the first enemy whom they want to encircle is Russia. And the second is obviously by the new NATO partners, China. And there is brutal critics to China, which is partly unbelievable because all these critics is showing double standards. And it's also mentioned that the same, what they accuse China, they are doing themselves. So these new NATO had their first meeting in Washington the last days, and it was also the 75th years anniversary of NATO. And when you are looking to some of them decisions, and I think we all have to read much more careful the documents, you can see that they are doing absolutely steps in more escalation. The first is to bring back, I have to say, nuclear weapons, land-based missiles to Europe. These are the same discussion we had in 79 to 83 with Pershing II and cruise missiles. And they are calling them now Tomahawks. These Tomahawks can use conventionally and with nuclear weapons. They can fly 2,500 kilometers or 1,500 miles. That means they can reach Moscow and the center of Russia. They should be coming to Europe in 2026. And this is definitely the next step of escalation, because definitely Russia will react by developing more nuclear weapons and putting the nuclear weapons nearer to the border to Poland and in the consequences also to Germany. The second is that they not only decided about these nuclear weapons, they also decided that the United States, Germany, France, and Spain and Italy are developing a new land-based missiles for the time after 2026. This is a part of a new NATO program. This new NATO program is an industrial program for developing new weapons and munitions. And it's a common project of the United States and the countries I mentioned. This is absolutely new, that we have now a transatlantic, or that we are developing now, a transatlantic military industrial complex. This is also absolutely new development. This includes that they will also bring the Dark Eagle, the hypersonic weapons to Europe, which is 5 times quicker than everything else. And they are bringing nuclear weapons to Great Britain, which they put back in the 90s. They will start with these nuclear weapons in the next year. NATO decided at the summit to have 35 to 50 new brigades at the border to Russia. This means in the Baltic countries, Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria. And that they are calling for minimum 2% GDP for military purposes. This means they are going to 3%. So they are following the line of Trump, who want to have the 3% in the document of his international staff persons. So that are some points which they are doing to show the aggressive military alliance and the real preparation of the war of wars. And now it comes the question, I will say some words to this before I will give the floor to you, and maybe I will say, is why they are doing it. Why NATO is so aggressive, why the NATO countries, the US and Europe, and let me say one word to Europe. Europe, and now I mean the European Union, have given up an independent foreign policy. They are happy to be the junior partner of the United States and following the rules, the actions, and the ideas of the international policy of the United States. The main point of this was when they allowed to kill Stream 2 and 3. So this is the line that the European foreign policy is nothing else than a longer arm of the State Department. It is very clear that European interests are not any longer recognized and not accepted. This strategy deindustrialized Europe, weakened the European industry, and bring a lot of social consequences for the European people. We have dramatic cuts in the budget for social affairs and ecological development, for healthcare and science, because of this armament race, and why they are doing it, why they are giving up, in reality, their own interest. The reason is that we have, from my point of view, is that we have tectonic change of the international power structure, that the United States, and in the follow-up Europe, is losing their main hegemonial position in the world. We are coming really to the end of 500 years colonial system. We have new uprising countries which become stronger and influential, and we have new coalition of these upcoming countries. The main country which is becoming stronger is definitely China. I think you all know this. China is the second, or even partly, it depends how you count it, the first biggest economy in the world. 7 of the 10 biggest harbors are in China. 5 times more students left the natural science and mathematics departments in China than in the US. 30% more patent requests are done by China scientists, and there is a long list which shows the huge development of China and the successes. And for me, the main successes that I can only underline, not being in support of all parts of the Chinese politics, but 800 million people, bringing 800 million people out of poverty. No country in the world ever have solved such a problem and developed such a success. So we have to accept this. China is a rising country. And next to China, we have definitely to mention India. India will in some years stronger from the economy than Germany. It is now on place 4 or 6. Again, which numbers and figures you are taking as a background. And these parties are working closely together as in opposition to the unipolar world of the US. They want to develop a multipolar world. And this is the background they created, above all, the system of BRICS, or the corporation of BRICS Plus. BRICS Plus includes many important parts of the global south, but also includes the most important energy producer, like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, the United Emirates. They are becoming stronger. They have about quite 50% of the population of the world behind us, quite 40% of the economics, and the growth of their economy is much higher than the economic development in the so-called Western countries. These rules of the imperial influence combined with the colonial influence and the upcoming for a new world order brings these countries which are losing to the position that they have to fight for their survival. And the only point where these NATO countries are much stronger than the rest of the world in the military purposes. So they are developing these conflicts, they are developing their military, the militarization of their country. Have in mind that the NATO countries are spending between 55% and 60% of the whole military budget of all countries. Or to combine Russia and NATO, NATO is spending 1.34 trillion for military purposes. Facts from 2023. Russia is something between 80 and 100, and China about 225 billion. So this shows the reality of the change in the power structure. And to stop this change, like all historical big powers were doing it, is the background of these brutal confrontation politics NATO is doing, and which was enlarged at the counter summit. Because I was telling only bad news, I really would like to say at the end some words of hope. I have not really a big hope. The only hope are the actions of the peace movement and all the peace-loving people to bring them closer together and to develop more common actions and activities. But there are some signs of hope in the last weeks and months. Let me mention 3 or 4. First of all, a sign of hope is that Julian Assange is free. This was such a hard and strong fight of the peace-loving people all over the world. And it's not only Julian Assange which is free. This wasn't a success for the freedom of speech and to publicize criminal activities of the war monsters. And that he finally must be given free and comes out of the prison is a huge success for all activists and all engaged people in the peace movement. A second point I would mention are the elections in France. It's a great success that the left United Front becomes the strongest part in the parliament, which creates a little bit hope that social justice and also disarmament policy can be more elected than in the past. A third point, which is connected to France, is it's not really a hope for big changes, but it's a hope that Jeremy Corbyn was re-elected against Labour and the Tories in his part of Great Britain, and that in addition to him, 4 independent Muslim candidates were elected into the parliament. This never happened in Britain before. So this is also a recreation of a more basic democratic organized opposition to the undemocratic election system in Great Britain. And let me say, a sign of hope is that the global south, many countries of the global south, are much more active in international politics. The global south developed the suggestion for a peace process in Ukraine. The best plan, from my point of view, is a common plan from Brazil and China, but there are also plans from Africa, from the African Union and others. And these plans and this common work of the global south for peace in a multipolar world is a sign of hope which can reduce the aggression of the NATO countries and can hopefully bring together more peaceful development. Not alone, but maybe in combination with the peace movement and peace activists in the industrial countries and with the peaceful opposition all around the world. This new coalition we have to develop, and this is a huge challenge from my point of view in the peace movement. Finally, words, I can tell you that the European peace movement, including the German one, is doing everything, but really everything, to stop the war in Ukraine. We have different opinions about the background and the reasons of this war and why it happened, but we agree in one common point, that we need negotiations and ceasefire so quick and urgent as possible, because this daily killing, the destroying of countries have to be stopped. And the same, from my point of view, is for the Gaza conflict. We need ceasefire and negotiation for Gaza. We need a new security system in the world. This new security system should be based on the ideas and philosophy of common security and regionalized these ideas of common security for the different region of the world. This is where International Peace Bureau and others are working on. And I think this is the way of hope. We can stop it with our united forces, and we have an alternative structure for developing a more peaceful world. May I stop now? And I'm very open to try to answer all your questions. Thank you so much.
Reiner, thank you so much. There's a lot there to digest and a lot of ideas and analysis for people to follow up on with questions and to deepen their understandings. Before we move to the Q&A period, I want to ask Paul Shannon to say something about the Ukraine campaign here in the Boston area, which is something that obviously people in other parts of the country, and I'm noting some of our international participants can undertake where they live as well.
Thank you very much, Joe, and thank you, Reiner. Well, I know we all want to get into these questions quickly, but to just reiterate what Reiner has just told us, the situation in Ukraine has never been more dangerous. Reiner has mentioned some of the recent military developments that have jacked up, astronomically jacked up, the danger of nuclear war. Under these circumstances in which the future of life on Earth may very well depend on what happens in upcoming months and maybe years, it is a time for people, whatever our positions on Ukraine, to push for a ceasefire and negotiations. If you agree, I urge you to get involved with us at Mass Peace Action and to get involved with our Peace in Ukraine campaign. I'm putting in the chat a link to a form that will allow you to just quickly fill it out, and you will be added to our campaign list. We will let you know of events coming up. At such a time when the future of the world is in the balance, it is a time for everyone, whatever our priorities, it is a time for everyone to do what they can to remove this growing danger of nuclear war from the world. And I urge you to take what Reiner said seriously and to get involved as you can. And like I said, if you would be willing to fill out this form, we will let you know of activities coming up. So let's get back to Reiner.
Actually, we go to Brian.
Thanks, Joseph, and thanks, Paul. And I do encourage everyone to do as Paul asked and click that link that was just put in the chat. We believe here at Massachusetts Peace Action, and I know that Joseph at CPDCS agrees that public education is a great way to spur advocacy and involvement. So please sign up. You could be planning the next one of these if you do. So we're all excited to hear your questions. Just a couple of ground rules. Let's please keep the questions short so we can get to as many as possible. And let's keep the questions as well. We want to hear Reiner's take on your queries and no grandstanding, please. But I will hijack the proceedings and ask the first question because I was intrigued by something you said, Reiner. You said that the combination of the activities of peace activists in the Western countries can be combined with the activities of citizens of countries that are the victims of our foreign policy. So I'd like you to just elaborate on that a little bit if you can. How can we do that most effectively? I'm sure everyone on this call is dying to know.
Should I immediately answer or are we collecting some questions?
Well, why don't you start with that one, and I will encourage people to formulate your questions in your mind and get those hands up, and then I'll call on you one by one.
You know, in many of the countries of the Global South, we have peace organizations and peace activists like in Europe, and we have to work with them much closer than we have done it in the past. We were very often nationally in our bubble, and when we open the bubble, we open it only for Europe. That is absolutely not enough. We need to strengthen the common forces of the Global South. And in the Global South, I mean governments, parliamentarians, and civil society with the peace movement in the West country. This could start with a very easy way, that we are getting in contact with the embassy and discuss with the embassy about political content and have exchange with the embassy. That could be, as a next step, developing contact with peace research and other institutions at the universities in the different countries. That can come as a third step to common congresses and common activities with organizations in the Global South. And we have internationally quite a lot of international organizations where we have the Global South present. For example, the majority of the board of IPB is coming from the Global South. So we can develop these common work and common activities. We are doing this in developing, for example, a common security strategy for the Indo-Pacific area. This we are doing with the colleagues in China, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. We are working together with these Australians and Great Britain colleagues and US colleagues against AUKUS. So there are a lot of fields where we definitely can combine our actions, and that could be a new quality of coalition building and international cooperation. For this, we can use the international gathering at the United Nations, but also many bilateral possibilities. And never forget that we have, with the new social media, we have definitely new possibilities. We don't have to write a letter, which takes 4 months to come. We can definitely communicate by internet and try to develop common activities. Joseph was a part of it. You know, we never could arrange these Ukrainian conference with Ukrainian, Belarusians, Russians, people from Brazil and other countries without internet, but it worked. And at the end, we had also participants from these countries taking part in the conference. So we should be a little bit more, how to say this, clever, flexible, think about it, how we can develop these common activities. You know, to say it maybe as an idea for the future, we have now these BRICS Plus. Why we don't have a Peace BRICS Plus with people, with civil society from these different countries? This is definitely not easy, but I think it is worthwhile to think about it and to start first steps.
Thanks, Reiner. I see our first hand. I'll ask you to unmute yourself and I'll bring you up on the screen. Donald Smith, your question.
Yes, Reiner, I want you to elaborate on what you said about the strengths and weaknesses of the peace movement in Europe, especially with regard to Ukraine. Specifically, I've heard, I saw articles saying that some of the left or green parties in Europe are very much in favor of fighting Russia. And so that's maybe similar to the US, where the Democrats are more pro-war than the Republicans. So just please elaborate on why the people in Europe are so in favor of fighting Russia and so again going against their own self-interest. Thank you.
You know, I'm a little bit more careful in my answer. We have, like you, political parties which are absolutely in favor of the war. This is in Europe, above all, and on the top, the Green Party. I have to say this. The Green Party is the most war-oriented party. This excludes some members of this party. But we have on one side also parties, left parties, which are working against the war. And I have to say the truth to you, we have also right-wing parties in Europe which are against the Ukrainian war, which makes our work not easier. That is the party situation. The situation of the peace movement is that 95% of the peace movement in Europe is against the war, is for negotiations and ceasefire, is against arms delivery, and against sanctions. So the problem of the peace movement is how we can mobilize more people. We have some first successes. We had a demonstration in Italy last autumn with about 100,000 people, which was the biggest one. And we had 2 demonstrations in Germany, one with 50 and one with 20,000 people on the street. So, and we had also quite big actions in Spain. So there are actions and activities. But I'm always saying, when you are looking to the situation, how dangerous the situation is, and how dangerous could be the development, the relation between the actions and the dangerous situation is not correct. We need, in relation to the dangerous situation, much more actions and activities. But we can say this, and we cannot develop a movement at the green table. So we are doing our best, many of us in many countries. And hopefully we will come to bigger actions and activities this year. We'll prepare a national-wide demonstration in Germany for October 3rd. And we are optimistic that we will be bigger than in the past. And I know that our French and British colleagues do the same. So let's unite us, let's try to help us, one the others, and that is what we can do. And this is not enough, but I think it's the best what we can do.
Thanks, Reiner, and thanks, Donald, for that question. Just to remind folks, if you want to come up on the screen, just use, and it's under the reactions option, the raise hand, but you can also put your question in the chat, as some of you have, and I'll read them off for you. So this question is from Madeline. Are countries militarizing and jockeying for power positions in anticipation of how world resources, migration patterns, etc., will change in the face of climate change?
I have nothing to say which you don't know and which you have also said. The first point is, when we're discussing about climate change, I'm saying always, never forget the wars. The wars and military is a climate killer. And I think we have many examples for the emissions and how the wars and the military destroyed climate. That is a key point. And I'm always saying this to the environmental movement, which sometimes forget that military is really a climate killer. The second point for me is that we need much more common activities of climate movement and peace movement. And that is also a part of our work. Because, we have to go to them, we have to discuss with them, we have to exchange information. Maybe also sometimes we have to convince them that climate and war and climate and peace are two sides of one coin. I think we all are doing it, and we are partly successful, but there are many, many more stones in front of us before we really can say that we have a united peace climate change movement.
Thank you, Reiner. I have another question from the chat. This is from Barbara Brown. Could you tell us a little bit more about examples of successful multinational peace work?
The biggest success is the development in Europe in the 80s, from the 70s to the 90s, where we are coming to a common security system in Europe. And it was finally documented in the Charter of Paris, which says that we need a Europe of peace, freedom, cooperation, dialogue, disarmament, and common understanding. That was a document which was signed by all European countries, including the former countries of the Soviet Union. The problem is that this document was only shortly accepted by the NATO countries, and that they were going a vice versa way. But it is a document which shows this. And German unification would never be possible without cooperation structures in Europe. The INF Treaty would never be possible when there would be not cooperative elements between the Soviet Union and the United States and Europe. So the years from 1917 till to maybe 2000 were years of successes in these common security development. The problem is that it was broken, and then I'm coming back to the discussion of the new power structure in the world by the NATO countries. So these are signs for successes of cooperative or common security structures. The same, I think, we can say to parts of Latin America. It is really a great success that Latin America tries to solve their conflict without war, including the conflicts now between Guyana and Venezuela. They decided they don't want to go to war. They want to find a peaceful way to solve these problems. And you can also tell this to others. So there are successes in different parts of the world, but all these successes are hard fights against forces which don't want to go the way of cooperation, but want to go the way of confrontation because they believe they could win in this confrontational situation. I don't believe in this way. So we will see how this way will continue. And never forget, we have also to have in mind the way of decolonialization. We have to continue the to overcome the colonial system and the rest of the colonial system. And this must be done in Africa and in other parts of the world. The time is not over.
Thank you very much. I'm getting some more questions from the chat. This question is from Stanley Ezral. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Stanley. Stanley says he is with the International Peace Coalition, which operates worldwide. So far, there's been no discussion of Putin and China. NATO and co claim they are out to destroy the rest of the world, but in fact, China and Russia have been at the forefront of improving living in the global south. What's your take on that? There has been a lot of criticism of China around the Belt and Road Initiative. What's your take on the investment that these countries have been putting into the global south?
I'm very open to discuss the Belt and Road Initiative. I'm very open to discuss about the foreign policy of Russia. I'm very open to have a discussion about Putin's development, Putin's life, and whatever you want. The question for me is on which background we are doing this discussion. Do we are doing this discussion in an atmosphere of solidarity, of exchange, of learning from each other, of respect each other, or doing this in an atmosphere where you want to confront the others with the opinion, and either this opinion or the other is right or wrong? And that is for me the key question. And we have in the peace movement maybe partly to come back to a form of solidarity discussion between us, where we openly discuss the difficult question of the world development, the world order. And the colleague in the chat mentioned definitely two questions. When I should say one sentence to Putin, Putin was speaking in the year 2001 in the German parliament. At the end of the speech, all the German parliamentarians were getting up, and he got applause. Long applause, minutes long. That was Putin in the year 2001 for them. 10 years later, or maybe 15 years later, he was demonized as the greatest, most bad man of the world. So, and now we need a discussion about what is really with Putin, what happened with him, with the system, and has Putin changed? Or is our politics, our government changed in the direction of Russia? Is it correct that we are encircling Russia? Is it correct that we also enlarge against the security interests of Russia, NATO to the east? So, and this discussion we have to do, hopefully quite friendly, and then we can see what are the common points and what we disagree. And I'm always calling and try to call for respectful discussions about the difficult question. No one of us knows how the world will be in 10 years because of the rapid changes in the world. And so we should be very careful in the discussion, very open in the discussion, listening to the opinion of others, and then see where we can agree and where we disagree. That is my point for this discussion about China policy, Russian policy, but also the politics of the European Union. I have many critical points with the politics of the European Union. So let's discuss it and see where we can find common points and where we disagree.
I think that's an excellent approach. I'll just insert that it and ask for your comment. That it seems that even within U.S. leadership, there is some, not even divide, because it's among some of the same people. You of course remember former President George W. Bush saying that he looked into Mr. Putin's soul and saw a good man, and then just a few years later, couple of years later, I think, was offering NATO membership to Ukraine and Georgia, which was one of the things that precipitated this crisis. So how the two opinions from the same person at one time, or why did it change?
You know, the reason international politics and foreign politics is never a question of ethics or moral. It is only a question of interest. And the interests of the country changed. And this changed the behavior of the country in their foreign policy. You know, one of the advisors of Willy Brandt was always saying, never believe someone who is saying international politics has to do with moral. Only believe that international politics have to do with interests. And what were the interests of many of the United States? The interest of the United States was always to weaken Russia and to weaken China. And the strategy to weaken Russia was to encircling Russia and to ban Russia in a circle that it could not come out. That was done since the beginning of the enlargement of the NATO, step by step and again and again. So, and this was absolutely against the security interests of Russia. You know, Russia was attacked from the Western side 3 times in the last 200 years. Napoleon was attacking it, then in the First World War, and I have not to tell you about the Second World War. 27 million dead, killed Soviet Union citizens and soldiers, and a totally destroyed country from Moscow to the border to Poland. There was nothing. Everything was burned and destroyed. This country has security interests, and it will always defeat the security interests. And one slogan everyone in Russia believes is never again, never be attacked again. And the enlargement of NATO was seen as such an attack to the security interests. So these interests were the background for many development, and this was also the background for the change of the policy of Bush. And you know, this was the interest were also the background of the change in the Afghanistan politics. You know, like me, invasion for 20 intervention for 20 years, and then in 2 nights you go. The interests are changing. There was not any longer an interest in the development of Afghanistan. They want to get rid of Afghanistan because they have other main hotspots they want to take in account. And that is the foreign policy of interest. All the countries are doing this. And the only point which we can work is that these international politics will have a basic on common security, on dialogue, cooperation, common understanding, respect. That is what we can fight for. And this happened in the past. We lost this track, and we have to come back to this track.
Thanks. On that point, can you speak from the perspective of the European NATO countries? Do you believe that they're acting in their interests in this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, between Russia and the United States?
First of all, never forget there is not a united front of the European Union countries. You know, you must not be a friend of Orban, but you can see that he is doing a lot of things to push negotiations. Going to Kiev, going to Moscow, going to China, and now going to Trump. He's on the way to Trump because he wants to push the idea of negotiation for the Ukrainian crisis. So he's one, but he is not alone. There is a prime minister of Slovakia who is quite in favor of it. There are a little bit more critical positions to the war orientation in France and also in Spain. So the European Union is not totally unanimously in this opinion to Ukraine. On the other side, you know, your question is then the question is which interests are in the middle point? For the German elites, which are heavily connected to the US elites by training, by historical experience, by universities, the biggest interest in this rapidly changing world is to stay next to the United States because they believe that there could be more on the winner side. And this means they give up some concrete national interest. For example, Germany has not a national interest to pay high energy prices, but we have to, because we don't get any longer the gas and the oil from Russia, which we are getting about 60 years. And we got it by all crises, including the invasion of the Soviet Union army in Czech Republic. No one was stopping this, including all difficult situations, Afghanistan in 79, the confrontation in the 80s. We always will continue with the economic interests of both sides. And this means to continue getting oil and gas and paying for this so that we helped the development of the country. So the first time that it stopped is now. It never happened before. And it makes the life of the Germans much more expensive. We had a huge inflation rate in the year 22. And now, and this is the totally stupidness of these politics, we are again buying Russian gas and oil. But it is not Russian gas and oil because we are buying it from India. Russia is selling it to India and we are buying it from India. It is definitely more expensive and it is not Russian gas. Who will say this is Russian gas? It is Indian gas and oil. But this shows the stupidness and short-term thinking of these politics. Up to now, Russia export about many different canals, up to 60% of the whole gas of Europe to Europe, and specific possibilities, partly even over the pipelines in Ukraine, above all about the Mediterranean Sea, about pipelines in Turkey, and. But everything is much more expensive than we get it by the pipelines which we have directly to Moscow or to Russia. So this shows there is no really thoughtful and advanced strategy behind. It was only said we have to punish Russia and we stop everything. And then we weakened Russia. And this is the next illusion. The GDP of Russia in the year 2023 and even 2024 is by 3 or 3.5%. The German GDP last year was minus 0.1%. And this year, hopefully, we will have a zero GDP. So no plus, no minus. Why is Russia has such a positive development of the economy? This has two reasons. One reason is they are more or less autonomous in many parts of their life conditions. They don't need any food production from other countries. They're totally autonomous in whole agriculture systems, which is new. And we were in the past, the German farmers were selling a lot of products to Russia, but this is over. Russia is totally autonomous in this point. The second is they are able to change their industrial structures very quick from a more or less civil industrial structure to a military-oriented, military-organized structure. So this was very quick done, and this is the background. They have these successes in the GDP, and they can pay for the industrial workers in the munition factories and others quite a good salary. So and it is, when you are going to Moscow or one of the big cities, you cannot see any sign of more poor people than in the past, or that the supermarkets are empty. Nothing. No change in their life conditions, or quite no change in their life conditions. So this shows that this Western strategy to ruin Russia, what our foreign minister was saying, is absolutely a disaster. And the best way is definitely to come back to, common interest. Put the common interest, economically, politically, whatever, in the middle point, and then try to develop the next steps. But this is against the confrontation of politics we are facing, against the militarization of all the politics. So it is not easy to be done, but this is the only way, from my understanding, out of the crisis.
I see a very interesting question in the chat. This actually refers to something that you said earlier in an earlier meeting, Reiner. Stephanie Hiller asks, if we stopped using fossil fuels, relying on fossil fuels for energy, the power map would change. What do you think of the possible combined benefit, political and environmental? You talked earlier about Germany's commitment to renewable energy. I'm wondering if you can share that with this audience.
You know, let me start from another point. We have the Paris Agreement, but we are not fulfilling the obligation of the Paris Agreement. Why? Because in such a situation of international confrontation, we will not solve any problem which needs cooperation. And definitely, to solve the climate change problem, we need a huge amount of cooperation between the different countries. So long we don't have the cooperation, to say it very clear, we will not solve the climate problem. It will be a problem. And it will be a bigger problem in the future. You know, all of you know the consequences of the climate change. We can see it and feel it day to day. But we will not solve this problem. Or can you imagine when we are standing tank to tank or rocket to rocket, we will discuss about how is the best way to reduce the emissions and how we need more international cooperation, more international dialogue, more international common project for solve these problems. And no country can solve this problem alone. No country. Even the biggest country like China, Russia, or the United States cannot solve it. So this means when you really discuss about solving or going steps forward in fight for climate justice, we have to overcome the confrontation situation. And the second is, who should pay for it? Who should pay the International UN Climate Fund? 100 billion since 5 years. Up to now, we have 37 billion from different countries. So we need this money from the military budgets very easily. It is less than 1%. It's quite nothing. But so long we have this confrontational politics, it will not happen. So this confrontational politics is very much connected to the question if we are successful by solving the global problems. I'm not only speaking about climate, but climate is one key point, but I'm also speaking about poverty and hunger. It's the same. We will not overcome these global challenges when we are not reducing militarism, and when we are not reducing military budget, and when we are not coming again to an international atmosphere of cooperation. This is, I think, the background of the answer to all questions which are connected to climate and climate change. When you want to hear the answer for fossil fuel and to Germany left the nuclear path. We have no power plants any longer. We closed every power plant. The last one was closed last year without any problems for our electricity or for our energy. We have more than enough energy even by closing all the power plants. So we reduced the danger of the power plants, and we have about 60% renewable energy. And this is enlarging during the next year to 80 or 85%. We are on a quite good way. We have a lot of problems with this because we don't have the electricity systems end to end. This we have to develop. This is quite cost intensive, but we are doing this. So Germany is on this way. We are quite good. We are not really good. We are leaving the coal path during the next 10 years. We have a decision of the parliament for closing all coal mines till to 2035, the brown coal and the black coal. So we are also leaving this path. So we are not so bad in these fields, even when it takes a much longer time than needed, but that it takes a much longer time. The background is that we don't have any resources for the transformation process, which is cost intensive, because we are spending all this money for weapons and for military. So again, when we want to have a quicker transformation to renewable, we need to shorten the militaristic behavior in our country and the military costs in our country. So that's, and quite the same is for other European countries.
Thanks. I'll just comment and say that if an economy as large as Germany's can transition to completely renewable energy, that would be quite an example for the world. So I hope you're correct in your prediction. You anticipated my next question. What do you make of the rapid increases in military spending that we're seeing, both here in the United States and, of course, the very large proposed increase in military spending in your own country of Germany?
You know, first of all, I have to say our increase per year during the last 2 years is much higher than in your country. So we are really the world champion in doing this. This is typical German. So what we are doing, the main point is to raise more public awareness about that. And that we are doing by many and many actions and activity of the peace movement. I can explain this in detail when you want. But one highlight for us is the national demonstration which we are doing on October 3rd. This is the week before we have the discussion about the next budget, national budget in the parliament. And in the middle point of our protest action next to peace for Ukraine is the question of the military budgets. And we show in many, many examples that we need the money which is spent for weapons. We need it for schools, for university, for teachers, for healthcare system. I think this is absolutely like yours. You have this brilliant campaign against military spending in your country. We have the international campaign about military reduction. So we are a part of it, and we are doing our best to promote these ideas in Germany. And this is not so easy, because because more and more, and this we again follow your country, we have more and more working places which are all depending from the military. In the past, the German military industry was very weak. We don't have so much German industry. We had about 100,000 workers in this industry, and we have 46 million workers with social insurances. So you can see the relations. But there is a huge development. The German military companies grow since 2014 and again make a jump after 2022. So we are now by a number about 700, 800,000 workers in Germany, and this will be even growing. So the conversion discussion becomes more urgent, but also more difficult. That is the situation that we are saying we have to stop it now before we are really going the wrong way, following the way of the United States, where the country cannot live without militarization. Otherwise, your economy will be definitely at the end. So, but we are on the wrong path, and hopefully we can stop this path before it is too dangerous and too late.
And how is the relationship between the peace movement and Germany in Germany and the trade unions that represent munitions workers, for instance? Have you been able to have conversations between those two groups?
We had for many, many years, we had very, very strong relations to them. We developed common campaigns for reducing the military budget and with the leadership of the big trade unions. We have two big trade unions next to the national trade union, which is the DGB, German trade unions. We have two big unions. One is IG Metall, and the second is the public service trade union. And now we have the problem that these trade unions, which their leadership is social democratic leaders, that they are following the governmental orientation of confrontation. And this makes the common work today very, very difficult. We are working together with many of these basis organizations. We are working together with some of their leaders, but we are trying our best again to come to common agreement also with the leadership and with the whole trade unions. But this is a problem of our strategy, of our partnership politics. This is really not easy now. We have the same problem with the churches. Above all, the Protestant churches is following the governmental orientation to war. And even the German priests are celebrating weapons, which is unbelievable for us. But we are doing our best. Catholics work with the Catholic Church is a little bit easier because of the Pope. He is really a big plus for us. But we definitely have problems in our, and this is not only a German problem, in our partnership politics with big partners from the past, churches, trade unions.
Thank you for that. And thank you to Joseph for sending that helpful link in the chat for the global campaign against military spending. I do encourage you all to check that out. You don't need to do it right now. We will include that link to the global campaign against military spending in a follow-up email along with the recording. And we encourage you to share that with your network, your friends and family, get the word out about this. Could you tell us a bit more about the demonstrations that you have planned in October? How can people find out more information about that and publicize it?
You know, we finalized last week when I was here the appeal for the demonstration. So we will put it next week on the website and all the social media. We have 4 key points for this demonstration. The first key point is negotiation and ceasefire, not only for Ukraine, but also for Gaza. And I have to tell you that for the Germans, the discussion about the war in Gaza is a very specific discussion on our historical background with the Holocaust and our strong and deep relations to Israel, which officially called so state official interests. So that makes it very difficult for us to criticize Israel. We are doing it, but it brings us not only friends. So that is the first point. The second point is the question of military budget and social affairs. So reducing the military budget and coming to social affairs. The third point of the demonstration is the policy of common security as alternative. We want to have, again, cooperative common relations to Russia and all other countries in the world. We want to avoid and overcome confrontation. These are the key points of our demonstration. We are preparing. It is really, we have got up to now a great support from the different parts of the peace movement for doing it. So we are quite optimistic. We will have international speakers on the demonstration and rally. But we are really in the beginning, you know, in Europe, above all in Germany, they are really vacation. And summer vacation is something like, it's really sick. People are out of the country and people need these 4 weeks of rest to recover. So we will really start with this work directly after the summer break. We have 2 events in these periods of the next week. We have the traditional, like you, activities around August 6th, all over Europe, to Hiroshima and Nagasaki Day, where we have a lot of activities decentralized in the different parts of the country. And then we have in Germany the September 1st. Maybe this is the day, you have the September 21st. September 1st is our International Peace Day, because the 1st of September 1939 was the aggression against Poland. This day is historically in Germany a peace day, which is mainly organized by the trade unions. And we are using this day now to enlarge the cooperation with the trade unions and to come to more common activities around this day. All of these actions are steps to the big manifestation of October 3rd.
Well, thank you for that. We eagerly await more information about the big demonstration on October 3rd, and any way that we can support you in getting the word out, we will be happy to do, of course. I will just say before we go into final words, is there anything that I should have asked you, Reiner, that I did not?
You know, I have not checked the chat because, you know, this was a little bit too stressful to check the chat and to talk.
I get that.
But I saw one question, maybe you want to have an answer or not. This was a question to Sarah Wagenknecht's party, to the new party in Germany. When you want, I can answer this question, but I can
please
also,
go ahead.
You know, we have a new party in Germany which was established in the beginning of this year and was running for the European Union election. It's a so-called Alliance Sarah Wagenknecht. Many people of this party are coming from the left party. The left party lost a lot of influence because it's more or less abstained from the peace question. And that was against the meaning of many people in the party and above all of many followers. So they lost quite all the elections. The new party get a first success 3 months after establishment by getting 6.2% by the European Union elections. They have now 6 seats in the European Parliament, and they are quite high by the polls for the next regional election or state elections, which we have in Germany in September, mainly in East Germany. So the key point of the party is the key question. They are very clear in the peace question, disarmament, a common security, negotiations, and peace are the key question of this party. They are very strong in the question of social justice. And these are the 2 points where many people which are disappointed with other parties and disappointed with the traditional left and were not going to the last elections, were elected this party by the first elections. So they could become a stronger force, not the majority or something, definitely not, but they could become a stronger force in the new party system in Germany. And this is a big hope because also this party helps to reduce the influence of the right wing, because the German right wing try to develop themselves as a peace party. This is definitely not correct. They have many points. They are in many points very much war-oriented, but in the public view and in the public propaganda, they are seen a little bit as peace party. And we have to take away this image from these right-wing parties. So this is also helpful that we have a left alternative to this right-wing peace propaganda. So that is, yeah. When you ask me to many other questions of the party program, I can only say this is in developing. Up to now, they have only a 4-page program and a program for the European Union elections. They are developing a program. I am not a member of the parliament. I'm speaking from outside, but I'm working with them together in the peace questions. So that is my answer to the question, to this party. We have some hope in it. We have, in the same way, hope like we have and had hope to the French left united. And we were supporting by some letters and by some documents also the campaign of Jeremy Corbyn. And hopefully we will have in the future some more left parties which are deeply connected to peace, which hopefully successful run in their different countries.
Well, let me just say that I'm sure I'm speaking for many of us here in the U.S. when I say I'm envious of your system, which allows multiple parties to come in and provide some benefits and poke some holes in that dishonest right-wing peace.
But Brian, even under the difficult condition of the British election system, which is like yours, it is possible to get some candidates as a start point through the election campaign and get them into the parliament. We have these 4 Muslim candidates and we have Jeremy. So the opponent candidate from the left, from left view against Starmer, the new prime minister of Great Britain, reduced the amount of votes for him by 20%. So this is a quite big first success. So I think and I'm a part of the discussion in Great Britain, even under these difficult circumstances, I think it is worthwhile to discuss where you can have, by concentrating your forces, successes in the election campaign. This will be definitely not happen by the presidential elections, but these are not the only elections. And I think left and peace-oriented people need also parliamentarian points in the society, because this shows that they are a part of the society. And we have really to engage with us a little bit more to get more of these counterpoints in the society.
Thank you. I really appreciate the optimism. I think that's incredibly important for us to, as we continue to struggle for peace against militarism, to stay optimistic, to do it with a smile. Otherwise, it's too easy to become disheartened. So I appreciate that very much. With that, I want to turn the mic back over to Joseph for some final words with you, Reiner.
So first, I want to thank Reiner and also our audience for being with us tonight. Just a couple of thoughts. Listening to Reiner and thinking about the cooperation that goes on by governments in terms of NATO, in terms of the globalization of NATO, what's happening in Asia, there's cooperation there. And I think that underlines our need for peace movement cooperation across the oceans and around the world. I'm trying to get my page back up here. So I think one of the values and the importance of tonight is kind of breaking out of U.S. parochialism, hearing a bit more about what's really happening in the world, and learning in terms of actions and directions that we can take. I think one other point I want to make is simply the need to organize. The reality is that in our country, the forces of the right have been getting off their duffs. They've been out organizing, and they've been out organizing us. And I think it's really critically important for people to be linking up with organizations, pushing your organizations to take actions, getting out in the streets, and changing the dynamic. I mean, this is how we make the change. The last thing I'll say is we have this particularly tough situation. And while we've been meeting here, there's been a press conference. I think we're all eager to know what happened at it. But in this really difficult and perilous time, I think it's important for us to remember that hope is something we make. It doesn't come from outside. We have to take action. We have to think our way through it. We have to move forward. So I want to thank you for that. We'll be in touch. We look forward to people on this call either joining Mass Peace Action's Ukraine campaign or being part of one of the communities where you work. I look forward to work with our partners in Japan as we work for nuclear disarmament, our partners here. And I just wish everybody strength, persistence, vision, imagination, and as they say, never give up.